I'm Jason Kander here with Ravi Gupta and Addisu Demissie, and this is The Game Within, a podcast about the stories, strategy, and culture that shape sports beyond the field. Our deep dive today has to do with the annual Patrick Mahomes Bowl taking place this Sunday in New Orleans. Amidst my team being supposed villains, Americans seem more and more likely to assign bias or even malfeasance in professional sports. In this case, it's the refs help the Chiefs because the NFL wants Taylor at the Super Bowl argument. We want to talk about why fans are so quick to cry foul these days and whether there's any credence to the skepticism regarding the Chiefs and sports in general. But first, we'll examine a unique question on the infamous Luka trade, discuss the possibility that flag football might be awesome, get into the surprising reason an MLB umpire was fired. Ravi will try to help us understand why everyone is into Formula One now. Oh, and by the way, the NHL got political this week, and suddenly I remembered that it's hockey season. So, let's start, y'all, with this Luka trade. For background, and for viewers, we're not going to get into like whether it was a smart trade or what. I think people pretty well have their opinion.
It was a smart trade for the Lakers.
Yeah, for the Lakers it was. We're more interested in some other aspects of it. So for those who don't know, which I don't know why you're listening to this show, but the Lakers, Mavericks, and Jazz completed a blockbuster 3-team trade on Saturday that sent Lakers star power forward Anthony Davis, defender Max Christie, and their 2029 first-round pick to Dallas in exchange for superstar point guard Luka Doncic, power forwards Maxi Kleber, and Markieff Morris. The Utah Jazz received Jalen Hood-Schifino. It doesn't matter who everybody else received. We don't need to get into it. It's really, this is about
the Los Angeles Lakers got Luka Doncic.
Yeah, that's really all you need to know.
For not a lot. I mean, my team, what did we trade? I'm a Knicks fan. We traded 4 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges.
Five.
And people thought that was actually a reasonable trade. People really didn't. It wasn't widely disparaged. But like you said, Jason, we'll stipulate that this was a bad trade for the Mavericks, at least on paper. We'll find out in the future.
I'm pretty sure everywhere, like on paper, anyway, yes.
I do have like, I could come to the defense of the Mavericks, but that's not this segment.
Yeah, this isn't a law school hypothetical.
Yeah. I am convinced that Luka Doncic's physical capacity is highly questionable at this point. I was playing around with ChatGPT this morning, putting in his weight, size, and information, and he's got an obese BMI as a basketball player with massive, he's at that point now. We've all been there where you cross certain thresholds, you get closer to 30, never mind past 30. You're carrying that kind of weight around. You're playing the sport like he's playing. You're ready not playing defense. You're ready super injured. I guess this is that segment. We're there already. I think that there's an argument for that. That doesn't mean that it was a good negotiation. Yeah. But there's an argument that there's some real risks there. And the Joel Embiid.
If the Mavs win the title this year, okay, congratulations, you did it. Yeah. But you gave up a 25-year-old or soon to be 26-year-old. Yeah, he's not even close to 30.
Davis gets injured. By the way, my argument would make a lot of sense if Davis was like this Teflon character, but he gets injured a lot too, and he's older.
Well, look, if he were a prototypical point guard, he wouldn't wear 77, and he's 25 years old. And when you're 25 years old, you get to eat whatever the hell you want, and your knees still feel
let the man drink his beer.
And at some point, like, look, he's moving to LA. I mean, the dude's gonna learn how to eat different than when he was living in Dallas. I mean, it's just gonna happen.
He'll be an Erewhon in no time.
That's right. I mean, Well, so go ahead, Ravi.
Well, I was talking to Supriya about this yesterday, and she was like, well, it's just the people in Eastern Europe are different. And she was like, look at Novak Djokovic. I was like, Novak Djokovic doesn't even... I read an article where he was mad at himself for eating dark chocolate. Like, it's not even a comparison here. Like, it's that guy... This is where the thing about Luka Doncic's competitiveness that I hear about so much. I'm like, well, if you were so competitive, lift some weights. Maybe eat a salad.
But
hey, first of all, he probably eats some weights. He probably lifts some weights. He just can't
I agree.
The other stuff.
I agree. He
might be eating the weights. I don't know.
To be clear, he's 25. He's a 5-time first-team All-NBA. He averaged, what did he average last year? Like,
I don't know. He's
33 and 10.
Yeah. He's the modern day James
he can do whatever he can do whatever the hell he wants with his body. Clearly it's working for him. But that's not the point here. The point is that Nico Harrison, who is the GM of the Mavs, and Rob Pelinka, who's the GM of the Lakers, negotiated this deal basically in secret. And they are long time friends. They've known each other since they were both in their mid-20s. They were Luka Doncic's age, and nobody else in the league knew. Nobody else in the league had a chance to bid the Mikal Bridges package or better for Luka Doncic, one of the 3 or 4 best players in the league. It's pretty crazy that they did this in the dark of night, that they managed to keep it in the dark of night, but that two good for, if me and Ravi decided to make a trade, it just feels weird. And especially given the fact the Mavs didn't get nearly what they probably could have gotten on the open market.
I thought about this because I watched the Hard Knocks New York Giants recently, where it's Joe Shane and Brandon Beane, who both work together at the Bills. And I saw Shane, who's not a good GM, it seems, talking to Brandon Beane. And I'm like, what's the ethics, Jason, of if you and I were both GMs and I called you up and I was like, hey, let me do this trade. And the trade is insane. As friends, what's the ethics there? Do you just let me make a bad decision?
I mean, I think you have sort of a fiduciary duty here, right? Like, I mean, it's the question is answered differently depending on your perspective, right? If you're a Lakers fan, I mean, it's a pretty easy answer to the question. If you're anything else, it's like, my son and I have been playing a lot, like at night after his sister goes to bed, True's 11, and we've been playing poker. Like, I've taught him how to play, Texas Hold'em, and he's getting really good. But when we were first playing, I had to like tell him when he was making a really stupid bet, and now I don't feel like we have to. And these two men are like grown men. So I feel like the ethical responsibility of Pelinka is to like let Nico cry on his shoulder now that he's just being panned. But that's it.
I'm your friend. I mean, it's true. Like the Lakers pay his salary. The Lakers, Pelinka, they are his employer. This was a professional relationship between him and his friend. It does call into question just the whole web of politics within the front office of sports. The idea that the fact that Pelinka and Harrison used to be friends when they were repping Kobe led to the Lakers getting perhaps a generational talent on their team. But I don't think Pelinka owes Harrison anything. This is Harrison's cross to bear, and probably why he's going to get fired within the next couple of years.
Yeah. Well, I think the question also is like, well, I think a lot of people were like, who knew about this? Right. And I think there were some obvious questions. Did LeBron James know about it? Clutch Sports represents Davis. He had to waive a trade kicker in order to do this. There's all sorts of questions around that. And then there's the question of Mark Cuban, who I think a lot of people were confused about his role. He's a minority owner, which we're learning means jack shit in terms of decision-making power. Like, it's more plausible that LeBron James knew more here, who doesn't own the Lakers in any way, than Mark Cuban knew anything about this.
Well, let's be clear. Mark Cuban definitely wants us all to know that he didn't know anything about it.
I don't blame him. I wouldn't want to. Yeah.
Me either. I think it's interesting. So, okay, for background, Cuban sold his majority stake in the Dallas Mavericks in December of 2023, but he was supposedly remain in charge of basketball operations, which clearly does not appear to be the case, because he said to a local Dallas radio station that he had nothing to do with the trade. He previously made clear his attachment to Luka, and he stated that this is in the past. He said, if I had to choose between my wife and keeping Luka on the Mavs, catch me at my lawyer's office prepping for a divorce. I mean, maybe there could be some blowback at home from that comment, but still. But so he publicly stated that he would maintain control over the front office and basketball operations. But it's clear that either he had something to do with this and he is like, no, I didn't, which I don't think is likely. So my reason I'm bringing all this up, because the different angle that I want to approach this from is Mark Cuban is probably going to run for president in 2028. It really looks like he's going to. I've talked to people recently who have been in touch with his people who are making it clear he's actively exploring the possibility. I'm just curious, like, is this going to be a thing? If you're running in a primary or a general election against Mark Cuban, are you going to use this to say like his judgment is questionable? Now, yeah, I mean, it's a genuine question. Like,
I think it's
a place where it bleeds into politics.
Good opportunity to tell people a little bit about your background, Addisu, which is Addisu for our new listeners, which is all listeners, I guess, because this is our first show. Has been a high level political strategist. I don't think this sticks because I think it's obvious he had nothing to do with it.
I think that's maybe part of the reason why he's trying to publicly dissociate. He is pretty much, disassociated himself from the Mavericks publicly since the sale. But it is interesting. He has, he supported Vice President Harris in the last election, the Adelsons, who, or Miriam Adelson and Patrick Dumont, who are the owner and governor of the Mavericks, clearly supported the President Trump. And so you've got an internal politics within the Mavericks organization. But I think Cuban wants nothing to do with the trade first and foremost because he loves Luka Doncic. He was willing to get a divorce or whatever, but obviously that was said tongue in cheek. But like the guy bet his entire future, when they drafted, I guess they drafted Trae Young and traded him for Doncic way back when. He was like, this guy's the future of the franchise. And guess what? Mark Cuban was right. So like, if someone wants to make the argument that as a minority owner, he made a boneheaded decision, in 2024, he could be like, I'm the guy who traded for Luka Doncic in the first place, and I wanted him, and he was the face of the franchise. So good luck Cuban is smart, I think, from a comms perspective, to get out there and just be like, yo, ain't me. And even if you saw the press conference with Harrison and the coach, Jason Kidd, it was Jason Kidd didn't look like he necessarily wanted to be there either. I think this is Harrison's cross to bear. I think the question that we have to ask, though, is did the ownership want this, right? And we've seen some theories out there that this is Harrison, but obviously the owners would have to bless this, right? Like the GM isn't just doing this without.
If they didn't, how could you keep your job, right? I mean, you don't go and trade. I mean, frankly, even if it's not Luka, you don't go and trade your point guard without asking the owners, period. Like I know some team owners, they at least all hold themselves out to be not necessarily running the day-to-day or making the decisions, but certainly they hold themselves out to be in on the decisions and aware of the decisions as far as personnel, which would make sense. Okay, but that brings me to the last question I have on this, which is what does it take for a GM to be driven out by a fan base? Because I always wonder about this when a GM or a coach or anybody seems, or even an owner, seems to have lost the fan base. What is the threshold at which the owner or whoever the supervisor is of whoever you're talking about, sometimes it's like a president of all operations or whatever, is obligated to kick them out the same way like a politician has to fire somebody they appointed because they took on too much water? Like these are not elected officials, but at what point does that happen?
Well, I think this is maybe we could use the same fact basis before, which is Joe Shane with the New York Giants, who's very unpopular with the Giants fan base because, in part, to use an analogy here, he allowed Saquon Barkley to hit the market, right? So, and didn't leverage that contract in a way that was smart. So the fan base hates him for it. Now, that's a more defensible decision in some ways because they were dealing with all kinds of cap issues, and there's a lot more conventional wisdom around running backs in the NFL.
This would be like if they had been in the Super Bowl the prior year.
Yeah.
Because of Saquon Barkley.
For sure. Now, I think, Tyreek Hill is a good example, though, right? Like, he's not Patrick Mahomes, but he was viewed as critical to that dynasty. And it could be that the Mavericks defy conventional wisdom here and overperform, and we think about this much differently. But I think this is, but what the Giants example prompts for me is like, I don't think Joe Shane is a good GM. But if the owner thinks Joe Shane is a good GM and he has a good relationship with Brian Daboll, which it seems he does, and Brian Daboll being the head coach for our listeners, that's more important to me than the fan base. Good relationship with head coach and owner.
Pelinka has been, I wouldn't say the most beloved GM for the Lakers, right? They made the Westbrook trade. Say what you will about Clutch and LeBron and others being a part of that too, but like, Pelinka has a airtight relationship, it appears, with Jeannie Buss, the owner of the Lakers, and it looks like has a good relationship with JJ Redick. But like he's let coaches cycle through and not taking any of the blame himself. I think it's because he has a constituency of one, and that's the owner. And so Now he's going to be probably carried around on, fed grapes by the Lakers fans for bringing Luka there. But I completely agree. I think GMs can withstand a lot. And partially I've heard, Bill Simmons and other commentators talk about this. It's because they are more proximate to the owners than the players or the coach, right? They get to talk to the owners and the other people in the front office every day and make the case that they aren't the ones making the mistakes. It's because X, Y, or Z.
You think the skill set is selecting good players. That's like down the list. The real skill set is managing up and deflecting blame. That's really what makes a great GM.
I mean, it's on the list. To put it like that.
Test. It's right. It's about to be put to the test. I do think, to go back to the Cuban point, I agree that it's survivable because remember, George W. Bush owned the Rangers when he traded Sammy Sosa for Hammer and Harold Baines and a bag of baseballs. So, and he, still, almost won the popular vote. So, so he still became president. But my point is, it is survivable. So, last on this topic, and we're going to get into this sports conspiracy theory stuff more in our deeper dive, but does anybody want to walk me through the conspiracy as to
Addisu, you do this.
Addisu, it seems like you understand it as to how maybe the Adelsons are trying to Rachel Phelps Adelsons,
and do it in a way that's convincing here. I want you to convince me that you believe this.
I mean, this is here is the theory of somebody's case on X, or I don't know. It's making the rounds, and it's at least persuadable. There are two things I think go at play. One is that sports gambling is illegal in Texas, and it looks like it's not going to make it through this legislative session. And I believe Texas has legislative sessions every 2 years. So we have another 2 years until there's another opportunity for sports gambling to become legal. And the reason why that's relevant is that the Adelsons made their fortune in Vegas in gambling. They own the Sands casino, and I assume a lot of other stuff too. But the theory of the case is that they desperately want to bring a sort of casino arena. They want to turn the Mavs into sort of a real estate development vehicle and bring that to Texas. But obviously they can't do that if gambling is illegal in Texas. And so the conspiracy theory is they're trying to tank the value of the Mavs by the time a couple sessions, the next session gets here or the session after that, and be able to threaten to move the Mavs to Las Vegas, original businesses, or demand from the legislature and the governor at that point, gambling to be legalized in Texas, and use that as leverage and have the team, basically the fans, not clamor to keep the team because they're so pissed off that the team sucks. That is galaxy brain shit to say the least, but did I convince you, Ravi?
It's not crazy. It's not crazy.
It is crazy. I'll tell you why it's crazy. Because that's not what sports valuations do for major franchises in the NBA, NHL, MLB, NFL anymore. They go one direction as of lately. And this is also true of the NWSL. It's true of the WNBA. They go up. And especially in the NBA, where you have teams that have been tanking to get draft picks, their valuations are going up. The reason I don't think this is, look, if this is true, it's the dumbest strategy ever, because the Adelsons are no stranger to politics. If what they want more than anything is to be able to play in a state that has legalized sports betting and can play next door to a casino or in a casino, then you just threaten to move the team and you go lean on the Texas legislature, and probably they've done some of that already. But I just don't think that what you do is, first of all, I don't think it's that hard to pack an arena in the NBA, as opposed to how it maybe used to be, because every week there's a superstar from another market coming into your arena. And we're not talking about NFL stadiums. We're not talking about MLB stadiums.
19,000 people, yeah.
Honestly, I think it would be hard to make the valuation of that team go down. You could slow the growth of the valuation, but to get it to a troubled franchise, I just think that would be just hard to do, frankly.
I believe in the somewhere in between these theories, which is that Miriam Adelson does not care how good the team is. I think she is somebody who's thinking about the casino and the assets of this more than anything else. And you got to think about what has been going on in Miriam Adelson's world while all this is going on. Well, she's been working hard to get Donald Trump elected and is probably like deeply ensconced in whatever is going on in that world and is probably like trying to have influence on the administration, whatever. And this guy calls her up, Nico Harrison, and is probably like, I'm going to save you money because we got this big contract with this guy who you don't even probably care that much about. And we got this other player and another pick. I think it's the right move. And she probably doesn't, we always think of the micromanaging owner, but some of these people, and this is the best kind of ownership, is she probably just lets her people do their thing. In this case, it led to a bad outcome, but it's generally a better approach is to not get too involved.
Okay, Ravi, I agree. And I will throw in one more argument for your case, which is that historically the issue that the Adelsons have cared about more than any other is Israel. And we are just a couple weeks off of a ceasefire. You got Netanyahu coming to the United States. I guarantee you that Miriam Adelson's going to be there for that. So I would agree. Totally. Okay. That's the theory
and good for her, by the way. You shouldn't get involved in owners. There's not a good history of owners getting involved in personnel decisions here. Cuban is actually a good example of it, but there really aren't many good examples of owners getting involved. In this case, maybe she could have stopped some insanity, but this is a historically bad trade. So like, I think
it's actually my understanding too, that the governor of the team is Patrick Dumont, who I don't know him, but is, early 40s. Also, I think married to her daughter. So his son, her son-in-law. But I don't think he cares either. Like exactly. Congratulations to that guy. Way to marry in, exactly. What'd you get for your wedding? I got the Dallas Mavericks. But the point is, I don't think that it's a dowry. I don't think that either of them. I think you're right. This is one where they probably saw this as a financial transaction, which, to be clear, it will save the Mavericks money. It will also probably make them a horrible basketball team starting 2 or 3 years from now and for the foreseeable future after that. And I mean, if all you care about is making money, you can, to Jason's point, you're still going to pack the arena when Wembanyama or Luka Doncic of the Lakers come through. So what do you care?
They're both in the West, right? Aren't they both in the West?
Yeah.
I mean, so you just gave him to a team you got to get past anyway. Okay. So I think we ran that to ground. Good job. All right, let's go to the NFL here. So the Pro Bowl happened. Nobody really knew about it, but the Pro Bowl happened. It's flag football now. Not that this matters, but the NFC defeated the AFC 76-63. I'll be honest, I didn't watch. I did make myself. I clicked on a 14-minute highlight video. I got through about 7 minutes. Not because flag football is necessarily not interesting, but because those dudes weren't all that interested in flag football, and you could tell from the game they were playing. Now, all that said, flag football is having kind of a moment. There was an NFL Pro Bowl high school girls showcase beforehand. It was a first of its kind NFL showcase of flag football. It took place just before the kickoff of the Pro Bowl in Orlando on Sunday. 30 female players were selected nationwide for the event. They played as the NFC and the AFC respectively. Meanwhile, the Saints have announced that they've officially sanctioned girls high school flag football in Mississippi, partnering with the Mississippi High School Activities Association. Ravi, you probably used to work with them when you were a school principal down there, to announce a newly sanctioned girls high school flag football league in Mississippi. And this is the 14th state to include flag football as an officially sanctioned high school female varsity sport. And so I guess I'm just curious, obviously we have an awesome renaissance of women's sports going. Is flag football going to be interesting to watch? Is this a thing that's going to become a sport in our lives?
I think it's play versus watch here. I think this is a big, there's some sports that are much better to play than they are to watch. And flag football is very high on the list. Like back when I was in middle and high school, we had that you'd be begging the gym teacher to give you the flag so you can go out at lunch and play with your friends. I think a lot of people have had that experience. I'm hearing from a lot of my friends who have daughters where they're getting super invested in this. It seems like a ton of fun. I have a hard time believing that this will be something that we watch.
Yeah, and I think some of it feels like, whether it's male or female athletes, it feels like diet football. And it's like, well, why don't you watch, who wants Diet Coke when you can have the sugary stuff, right? That said, I do agree that, not unlike some other sports that are sort of, high school, college sports only, but don't become pro sports, this could actually become a really great thing for women and girls to play and maybe even, get scholarships to college or whatever it might be for as part of Title IX, et cetera. And also get more women and girls interested in tackle football as, good for the NFL, which is unquestionably why they are investing in it. But as a spectator sport, I don't know, you never say never, but I think I'm with Ravi that it's like ultimate frisbee or one of those sports that's like when you play it, you're like, God, this is great. Then you watch it on TV and you're like, this is not as fun as being out there, amongst the trees diving after frisbees. It is. Let me switch over to baseball or whatever the traditional sport is.
Okay, here's my argument for how it becomes a sport that we all watch. One, it's going to be featured in the Olympics. That's my worst argument because it ain't like we're watching downhill skiing every day or track and field all the time. We get super into it every 4 years and then we forget about it for a few years. So that's not my best argument. My best argument is if they change the rules and if they feature athletes that are like Barry Sanders-ish, right? For one thing, I watched a little bit, like I said, of the Pro Bowl, and I don't understand what the poor center is doing out there. They have to hike the ball, and then there's a dude who's allowed to blitz, and the center is on a knee and is apparently not allowed to block that person. So that to me seems to be, if you are a Pro Bowl center and your job is to snap the ball back to a dude and then get on a knee and cheer, like that's kind of embarrassing. So let's do away with that. And what I'm really saying is, if you want to make this watchable, don't call it flag football, call it backyard football. And make it two-hand touch and make it totally relatable to the game that we all played as kids. Have refs who judge whether you really waited till 5 Mississippi. Have replay for whether you really got the guy or gal with two hands, right? Whether it was two-hand touch. Have all that stuff. Have there be like that generator box is the corner of the end zone, and that, you know what I mean? Let's go all the way.
Let's take it a step up, Jason. Let's do it in an indoor arena where we pump snow into the arena, so it's like a snow day.
Sure.
So it's like all games are snow games.
That gets to my next point, which is every field has different dimensions. It's kind of like the outfield in baseball. You're going like when you go to your friend's yard to play, like one of your friends lives on a farm.
Are there just random cars going by every now and then? You got to stop the game.
Yeah. Who knows? I mean, another one
Game
of your
off.
friends has a
Put
very
advertising
small
on the cars.
backyard. Exactly. Yeah. So I'm saying there's a whole, then now you're drafting a team for the dimensions of your field. Anyway,
by the way,
I would watch.
I kind of love that. I think somebody has recently suggested doing that in the NBA, like giving each arena one thing that they can do differently, just like a baseball stadium is the analog. That would be super fun, to your point, because each team would be built for their 41 games at home. So I love that. I love that for any sport, honestly. It could be a cool thing, but anything, it makes it less diet football. Everything you just said is kind of the point there, right? It makes it a totally different sport, which I think is the only way something like that would ever catch on.
Let me give you an analogy
where you're not comparing it, where you don't feel the urge to compare it to football. You just enjoy it on its own.
Well, here's the analogy, right? There's almost no sport out there where there's multiple versions of it that we like to watch. It's super rare. Think about 3-on-3 basketball. I actually went to the big three. I dragged our buddy Jamie Hodari to it. It was so bad. But the one example where it works is martial arts and boxing, right? You have boxing, MMA, you have all kinds of different examples of that. And the MMA is probably the analogy to what Jason is saying. It has to feel different enough.
Yeah, but those aren't really two different versions. That it kind of proves your point. I mean, they're not.
Yeah, so I'm saying that's what it has to be. It has to feel different enough, like you're saying.
Well, but so I think an example of it that is yet unproven where it can work is softball is different than baseball. Now, I don't know why to this day. It doesn't make sense to me that that we have college softball and college baseball. Like, I don't know why. Like, women could play baseball and it could easily be very interesting, just like men's baseball. But that said, whenever the college softball World Series is on, like, I watch it, and it is a slightly different version of the same sport. Mm-hmm. So I don't know.
But not that many other people are watching it. It's
true, but they are starting a women's professional softball league, and at least plan to watch it. I think, if they get the right players, it could be cool. But anyway, all right. With that said,
we've waited long enough to talk about this. Are we talking about baseball? Or are we talking about
no? People got to wait just a little bit longer.
Oh, okay, hold on, guys. We'll get to. We are aware that there's a game on Sunday.
Oh, we're very aware here.
We're gonna get there.
Greatest city.
Jason won't let us.
Kansas City. All right. So umpire Pat Hoberg was fired by Major League Baseball after an investigation showed that he had shared sports betting accounts with a professional poker player who also placed bets on baseball games. So to make sure this is clear for everybody, he wasn't necessarily placing bets on baseball games, but he shared an account with a poker player who was placing bets. So, it's no evidence of having manipulated baseball games was found. A sports book reported to MLB that Hoberg had created an account with them on January 30th of last year, 2024, prior to MLB opening the investigation that February. He was terminated under the collective bargaining agreement that broadly requires umpires to maintain the integrity of the international game of baseball. So, couple of historical or really just recent examples, because if you go back far enough, you got several. Jonte Porter in the NBA last year, former Toronto Raptors player, and I believe Mizzou product. Jonte Porter was permanently banned from the NBA in 2024 after an investigation revealed he had disclosed confidential information about his health status to bettors and placed bets on NBA games using another person's account. He later pled guilty to federal charges relating to the betting scandal. Terry Rozier, NBA this year. Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier is currently under federal investigation for allegedly manipulating his performance in connection with an illegal betting scheme. The probe focuses on a 2023 game during his tenure with the Charlotte Hornets. I guess he figured nobody would notice, where unusual betting activity was detected. Rozier has denied any wrongdoing and has not been charged. So the obvious question here is, like, with gambling everywhere and sports betting everywhere, one, are we going to have more of this? And two, where do you draw the line? Like, what if the umpire was just trying to bet on other stuff?
I mean, the answer is 100%. This more is coming.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing is just weird to me that the NBA and the NFL are making deals with FanDuel and DraftKings and then not expecting this to happen, honestly, at scale. This guy, this is an edge case. The Jonte Porter case, maybe if Terry Rozier is found to have manipulated his performance with the coach or whoever for pulling him out of the game, like, that's not the edge case. That's like squarely in the, in what Pete Rose did and got banned from baseball for forever. But
it's actually headed. Right?
It's worse because it's them actually betting on themselves,
betting on the sport they're playing,
and not just betting on themselves, underperforming. Which is
like they were able to prove that Pete Rose bet on his, but never in a way where he could give less effort and get money.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but I think we're headed to this. There's going to be a Jonte Porter scandal of massive proportions in some sport at some point. It is inevitable because money talks, and whether it's going to be an umpire or a player or a coach, it's coming. It's too easy. And some of the Jonte Porter and the Terry Rozier examples are actually like the dumb first pioneers of this travel, this journey towards some kind of pretty massive corruption once somebody figured out how to do it smartly. And it's unfortunate, but I don't think, but it's inevitable. It really is. I truly believe it.
Yeah, and it's important for people to realize that this is a new industry. Michael Lewis did a really good podcast series on his podcast season recently on this. It's $10.9 billion industry as of 2023. It was up 44% in revenue just year over year, and it's expected to double in the next 5 years, and probably more than that, because a lot of states are passing laws allowing for sports gambling. You can't avoid the ads and the conversation around it. It is baked into the game. And I was always one of the people who felt like they were too harsh on Pete Rose, but I think at this point, given the scale of everything, I do think a black and white rule is really important. Like, don't gamble at all. It makes it easy. And I think it also helps the players keep a bright line so that they don't develop habits where they could step over the line.
You know what I think we won't have, most likely won't have, is anything rivaling like the Black Sox 1919 scandal, right? Because they threw the whole World Series, right? There's a couple of reasons I don't think we'll see that. One, the players who are most likely, in my opinion, players or coaches or whatever who are most likely they're not gonna be the superstars because they're compensated to a degree. Now, if one of them has like a compulsive gambling problem or massive debts or something like that, that's different. But the other reason I don't think you'll see it is, I mean, one, like the Black Sox or the White Sox, like those players just weren't I mean, most of them had jobs in the offseason, right? So they're more susceptible to it. But the other thing is, what we have now that we didn't have then is all these prop bets. And so you could, as a player, you could be like, look, I'm not going to do anything to hurt my team's ability to win. But like, I mean, you don't even have to go as far as being like, I'm going to keep my eye on the spread. It could just be like, hey, you know, if I'm one basket away from 20 points and we're up by 20 and I'm going to make sure I miss the rest of my shots if there's a prop bet on me to get 20 points, you know, like,
or I'm going to pass the ball.
Well, it's the
like even in a close game.
It's the refs you got to watch the most because they make the least
and come out. Yeah,
it's the refs because there was actually obviously an NBA scandal already on this years ago before we even had this huge industry. They don't make a lot of money, the referees. This is why they go on strike in various sports every few years, and they have way less attention on them. So it's way less likely that some random whistleblower is going to figure it out. If it's like a cousin of some random ref somewhere, it takes a lot more work to put that together. I think that's a bigger issue. And they, in some cases, like if you're the eighth man on an NBA team, you have way less power to throw these prop bets than a referee does.
And I would say also assistant coaches, right? Or trainers for the exact same reason, right? Oh, this guy, you know, bet the under, and the trainer says, this guy has strained his calf, and this is what happened with Rozier. It's like, this guy has to sit out. In theory, allegedly happened with Rozier. This guy has to sit out the rest of this game because his calf is strained and it's in danger of an Achilles injury. Well, I just bet the under on all his props, or my third cousin twice removed did, and done. But I think you're right. But we almost had the Shohei Ohtani thing blow up directly in our face here, and I think somehow, honestly, impressively, that just came and went because people believe it was the interpreter. But
that guy the interpreter was clearly like a pathological liar, it turned out.
Clearly. But the interpreters, the agents, the assistant coaches, the refs, they're,
as you know better than anybody, there are a lot of people in these players' universes. And I will admit that, you know, I play in one fantasy football league. I've been in the same one for like over 20 years with a bunch of buddies from college. And my thing every year, everybody laughs at me, is I just draft Chiefs. I never win the league, of course, because and even when we weren't the Chiefs that we are now, I was just like, I don't ever want to be in a position where I'm watching my team on Sunday and I'm rooting for anybody playing in that game that's not wearing red, right? So that's always been my thing. I just draft Chiefs. But I draft so many that I have to figure out who to start. And a few seasons ago, I definitely did text a friend of mine who will remain unnamed, who is on the staff over there. And I was like, hey, just out of curiosity, think so-and-so is going to play? Because they had been hurt, you know? So like and I guess technically that's gambling. So I put $150 into the league at the beginning of the year. So it's so easy for this to happen. Is my point.
So easy. It is a great, it's fun. Don't get it twisted. Ravi knows I love gambling. It's illegal here in California, sports betting. I think that will change eventually, but like I am not against sports gambling at all whatsoever, but we have to accept that this is the risk that comes with having it so ubiquitous in our sports culture. It's just, and if we're willing to accept the trade-offs, and it seems like we are, then we can't be surprised when a Jonte Porter thing happens. Nobody should be surprised when the next one happens.
The major sports treat this the way Major League Baseball treated steroids in the mid to late 90s, which, oh my gosh,
I can't believe it.
To really put a stupid pun on this, I had no idea there was gambling in this establishment, right? I mean, they're pretty well wrapped up in one another. But all right, with all that, Ravi, let's take a moment for you to talk about Formula One announced I don't know. Tell me why I should care about this.
Well, okay. So the Formula One announced their 2025 race start times at full schedule. So there are just tons of races all around the world. But 4 in the United States, the Miami, or in the North America, Miami Grand Prix, May 4th, Pirelli Grand Prix, Canada, United States Grand Prix, Austin, Heineken, Las Vegas Grand Prix, November 22nd. You could throw Mexico in there. And so there's a lot of F1 coming here. It's become more popular in the United States in part because of this Drive to Survive. I know, Addisu, you're a fan of it, the Netflix show, which pioneered this certain format of introducing people to sports. It was very successful with tennis, a little less so with golf. They did it with surfing on Apple TV. They did it with more popular sports like basketball and football with Netflix as well. And I think Addisu's in my camp, which is, I don't know if it was because of Netflix, but for me, it was years ago with Netflix. I had no interest in the sport, and I've become very interested in the sport because it's so different. This is my pitch to you, Jason, to pay attention this year and maybe use the Drive to Survive as a gateway. It's like corporations really competing against each other. It's like full-on teams of people. The engineers, the person who changes the tire makes a huge difference, can make a huge difference in a game. The people who run the finances to the team principal. And the biggest pitch is, and we'll probably talk about this in future episodes, the NBA is struggling in part, and this is a preview of my theory, because everybody's so media trained. Nobody really talks shit to each other in any way that's that interesting anymore. Whereas in Formula One, all the people involved are so petty, and it makes it so awesome. That's my pitch. I don't know if DC want to jump in here.
I agree. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a diehard F1 person, but the reason why I'll wake up on a Sunday morning and watch a race is because the individual characters are so much more interesting than American athletes for the most part, because of what Ravi just said. There is no hiding their disdain for each other. There is no hiding the rivalries that are out there that are historical and that continue. And, you know, I love the Golden State Warriors, but like when the Warriors play the Lakers, and I hate the Lakers, at the end of the game, Steph and LeBron are dapping each other up. LeBron and Draymond are going out to dinner. And like these Mercedes and Ferrari guys are not going out to dinner. They are like slashing each other's tires.
Wait a minute.
That's kind of fun.
You've been the political advisor to LeBron James and you hate the Lakers?
I hate the Lakers. Yeah. I mean, I sports hate the Lakers, but like, I'm a Warriors fan.
I mean, that's impressive that,
yeah,
clearly you're giving some great political advice if that has not affected that relationship. Okay. Now, my question though is, so I got a little bit into soccer via a similar path by watching Welcome to Wrexham. And so I'm embarrassed to say I believe the kids say basic in that really the only European team that I follow at all is Wrexham, which is funny because they're like, I think now they moved up to like 3rd tier, and I'm just like, you're basic. Like I saw the show, so that's, I pay attention to the team, and I will watch, when the new season comes out, I'll watch, and I will check every once in a while to see where they are on the table, the standings. But I have not gone out of my way to go be able to watch like a Wrexham match live, like to stream it or anything like that. Although, funny story, it was powerful enough that when we were in Europe recently, we were supposed to go to Paris. I tried to get Diana to go to Wales and to watch a game, and she was like, "Are you crazy? Like, we're not doing that. We're going to Paris." But anyway, my point is, do you find yourself actually watching the races?
Yes. It's funny, but I have you frozen in a very interesting position. Gosh. I don't know if Addisu sees that too.
Right, you answer this question while I log off and try to unfreeze myself.
Well, here's my thing about watching F1, Addisu. I think I like to just have it on in the background. It's not like you're glued to it in the way you are other sports, like where it's like, okay, any minute now something will happen. But you got this like zoom, like, going into the audio of this person, Yuki Tsunoda cursing out his engineers or something. And every now and then it's just fun background listening. The real fun of it is all the stuff that happens in and around the races. And so, Jason, what I was saying to Addisu is just that it's a weird watching experience. Like, I kind of put it on his background. It's kind of like baseball in the sense that there's
like
lot
golf. I don't put baseball on his background, but I'll give you golf.
Yeah.
Golf.
But but the thing that's really interesting is they've got audio in all the different people's cars, and they often are yelling at their engineers and their team principals over strategy because, you look at it and you're like, well, these people are professionals on TV. Why are they so why are they so emotional? But then you think about they're flying like 200 miles per hour and things are going wrong. And it's like, it's nobody's going to be their best in these moments.
Do people not change teams often?
Oh, well, there's a big one this year. This is a good year for this.
Yeah. Lewis Hamilton. Yeah.
Yeah. So Lewis Hamilton.
Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah. He's like the Tiger Woods of F1. And he switched to Ferrari, which is like the Cowboys of F1 basically. And he switched from Mercedes, which had been the most dominant team, and
which is like the Niners of the 80s. It's like, it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. So that's a big deal this year.
All right. You can keep working on me. I'm slightly more interested. All right. We're gonna go to the NHL. Because I want to get to talking about the Super Bowl in a second. We're gonna skip the gritty LGBT thing. And I just want to talk about this video that spread around the internet of Ottawa Senators fans, a lot of them loudly booing during the performance of the American national anthem on Saturday. It continued for a duration of the song. It was widely seen as a direct response to the Trump administration announcing 25% tariffs on Canadian goods and 10% on energy products. The Ottawa Senators went on to win 6-0 against the Minnesota Wild. But only a couple of years ago, in March of 2023, the vibes were much better between Americans and Canadians. In a home matchup against the Buffalo Sabres, Toronto Maple Leafs fans started singing the Star-Spangled Banner when the singer's microphone went out shortly after starting. It was a crowd of 18,000 fans, mostly Leafs fans, and they didn't miss a beat and sang the entire song in a viral moment. Now, granted, Toronto and Ottawa, Toronto's like North Detroit, but still.
Whoa, relax. I grew up in Toronto. I can't wait to talk about this.
I know. You did? Okay, great. Talk about this.
Yeah, we have a bona fide sort of Canadian. I don't know if you.
I was born in Canada. Yeah, I was born in Canada. I grew up in Toronto until I moved to Atlanta when I was.
I'm just saying, 11, but it's like pretty American there. Right?
It is pretty American. Toronto's about the most cosmopolitan city.
I was not talking smack on Toronto or Detroit. I was okay.
We just lost Addisu.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway. So I guess while he comes back,
I'll lay out my theory while he's away with his.
My internet was mad about you talking shit about.
All right,
Canada
go back to you, Addisu.
Perceiving it. No, first of all, as someone who grew up in Canada for most of my younger years, I cannot communicate to everybody here and everybody listening just how important hockey is to Canada. Like it is 10 times more important to Canada than football is to the United States. It is the sport. And, the fact that the Canadian team hasn't won the Stanley Cup in 30, what is it? I think it was the Canadians 34 years ago is like a deeply difficult thing for Canadians to deal with. I say all that because hockey games are actually where politics, hockey is a political sport in Canada because it is the national pastime. It is baseball, I guess, is the best analog. And so I am not surprised at all that there is a political statement and protest, as it were, at especially in Ottawa, which is the capital of the country, in response to the tariff announcement from the president. I think it just goes to show, it's sports, right? Sports and culture and politics mesh. They mesh a lot. they overlap a lot. And when 20,000 Canadians get together in a place that is like a cathedral of the culture, you're going to get an expression of what is happening in the moment. And it is honestly, I'm surprised it doesn't happen more, and it probably will happen more over the course of the next 4 years. But a lot has changed in the last, couple of years. And I think the Canadians in particular, the Trump has provoked Canada, to say the least, over the course of the last couple of months, not just with the tariffs, with his words. And Canadians are going to speak up in their public spaces, and no more public space in Canada than a hockey game.
I understand this, but I think it's a line I would caution people not to cross. And I use the example of Russia with the Belarus and Russia in tennis. I know, Addisu, you watch tennis. There's certain players who I have a lot of respect for who come from those countries who face a significant amount of hostility out there. And in that case, it's an even more extreme example where it's like they're speaking out against your country as an athlete who lives in Russia and has family there. That's a whole other ball game, and that's something to ask of somebody that I'm not sure a lot of people I know in the U.S. would do, which is put their family in danger to do that. And so when I'm watching people getting hostility or being forced into speaking out against their own country while in sporting events, I understand the impetus for it. But it worries me if that's too broadly applied. It's one thing if it's like an invasion of another country, which in that case, maybe we make special occasions, like we make special.
It's like boycotts and
like there are certain examples there, but I personally, I would not sing the national anthem. I might not stand for somebody else's national anthem if I don't respect their government. Booing another country or a player because of where they came from, especially if they're not like espousing particular views, that worries me a little bit.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. And it's sort of, I don't know, it is an allegory for what Americans may face generally over the next 4 years as they travel, whether as professional athletes or not. So, all right. Now, finally, there is a game this weekend. And we talked a little bit earlier about some conspiracy theories in sports. People could look at this, like the Chiefs, as villains thing from a lot of different angles. And you could turn on, if you don't live in Kansas City, you could turn on talk radio for sports, and they're going to be giving you the point of view that everything is rigged for the Chiefs. Probably if you do live in Kansas City, I can promise you, if you turn on the radio, you're going to hear people having quite a chip on their shoulder about people saying that. So with all that said, that's not the angle that we're interested in. For background for everybody, the Chiefs are on the verge of making NFL history by becoming the first team to win the Super Bowl 3 times in a row. A mix of factors from media saturation, which, by the way, growing up here in Kansas City, the idea that there would be media saturation about Kansas City is something we dreamed of and could never have imagined. Star power like Taylor Swift, and then postseason success. NFL fans around the country have built a narrative that the NFL itself and referees alike are purposefully throwing games for the franchise. Texans coach D'Amico Ryan even went on record that the team felt they were playing the referees as well in their matchup with the Chiefs. Calls are heavily scrutinized by fans and opposing teams alike, from opposing defenses flagged for touching Patrick Mahomes to ticky-tack penalties, they say, against opposing offenses. It is clear that this sentiment is not siloed. There's similar narratives that we've seen in the past that surrounded other successful franchises in sports history. Just recently, some that come to mind include the idea that the Patriots were cheating to win during the Brady era. This absurd idea that referees are responsible for the Chiefs' victories from 19 to 25. The idea that the Dodgers have to pay to win, signing Shohei Ohtani last season and phenom Roki Sasaki this last month. That's not even a conspiracy theory. That's just there's no salary cap in baseball, and the more you spend, the better you do. The Golden State Warriors, which I guess would just go to being like sort of like with the Chiefs, they're successful, so people want to hate them. And then now the Eagles tush push over the past few seasons. So rather than like finish this whole monologue, what I would say is it feels different now. This doesn't feel the same as when people were just like, I'm tired of this team because they keep winning. Like that, I understand. This really feels like people want to believe that there is a large conspiracy at play. Am I right? Or am I just more sensitive to it because it's my team?
Well, I from a psychological perspective, I'm a Bills fan for people who are new to this. It's easier to believe and more comforting to believe that there's a conspiracy out there than to believe one of two alternatives. Either your team didn't do enough to win, or that there was just an unfair mistake, right? And I happen to believe it was an unfair mistake combined with things we could do to win, right?
Very, very big of you as the world's biggest Bills fan. I just got to say.
Good job. And that's why I come down on it. And it's like, yes, like I do think there was a call that if it would have gone our way, we would have had a much, much greater chance of winning the game. And I think that call should have gone the other way. At the same time, there were a lot of plays we could have made to win the game despite that. Right. And that's a harder reality to accept than, hey, let's all get together and complain about a conspiracy against you. There are also like a lot of different factors at play that are short of a full-blown conspiracy that are just incentives, right? That you could break down one after another. Is it a home game or not? Is it a famous player or not? Is there a certain style of play that is more conducive to calls than another? I thought the Ringer did a really good job of breaking this down in a piece about Patrick Mahomes. And basically where they came down is like, it depends on where you set your lens, right? Is it all the games the Chiefs play, or is it the most high profile games, right? And they talk about like the Eagles holding call or whatever. And like where I come down is often what's happening here is either sometimes just unfair, one call goes the other way or not, combined with other factors that are not a conspiracy, but that certainly could benefit one team more than the other. And that could piss people off. But I'll pause there. I have so much to say about this outside of the Chiefs in general, but that's just from my perspective. It's just easier to believe that there's people out to get you. It's also flattering to think that everybody's thinking about you, and that's like how the world works.
I also think the world is backlash is in every element of our culture. Backlash to success has become the norm. We like an actor until something happens that makes us then decide that he's terrible. It's not cancellation per se. It's the cousin of cancellation, which is you're too successful, and so something must be wrong. And so I think there's an element of that's just nobody likes too much success in our culture, because I think part of it is honestly because so many people are struggling out there. And so it's hard to look up to successful people, rich people, without being a little bit resentful of that. And so that's going to seep in. I also think from the Chiefs perspective, some of it is just, I do think superstar calls are a thing in every sport. And I don't think it actually is because of some nefarious deal with the refs or the umpires or the whatever it might be. I think it's because there's a reason why superstars are protected, is because they are the cash cows for the league, right? And that's true of Josh Allen, just like it is of Patrick Mahomes. But Mahomes had the ball, right? Mahomes. I'm thinking of the divisional game against the Texans when was it that game? What was the game where he?
Yeah, where the two roughing the passers calls.
The two roughing the passer calls, right? It's like, well, yeah, of course you're going to be more aware. It's not even protecting him like he gets different calls. It's like you're going to be more aware of what's happening to Patrick Mahomes than you are of whatever, Mason Rudolph. Like that's human nature, right? So some of this is just the human nature of being more aware of what's happening when it's Mahomes to Kelsey than you are of what's happening in a, Titans Saints game. And also, not to mention, the eyeballs are all on it, right? So that probably happens 6 times a week in games that people aren't watching. But when people are watching the teams, people are watching the Bills, people are watching the Lakers or the Warriors or what have you. And so you're going to see it. And when you see it, you think it's unique to that game when it happens everywhere all the time. Refs are human.
I like what you're saying, Addisu. And I want to say 2 things about it. One, with the disclaimer that I do not accept in any way that there's been a single victory this year that wasn't 100% earned by the Chiefs. Let me just put that out there. Let me also say at the same time that I do think that there is a thing of, like, call it greatness bias. In baseball, people talk about there being a different strike zone there was a different strike zone, they say, for like Albert Pujols than a rookie. And that was because umpires would look at it and they unconsciously, if there's a ball that's on the corner and Albert Pujols doesn't swing at it, an umpire's brain naturally says, well, if Albert didn't think it was a strike, it's probably not a strike. They may not even have that thought process. And so when, a Mahomes has the ball and he does something, I agree, there's a greater focus on it. Now, I don't think that, like, I could go through, if you look at the stats, there's all sorts of things that say the Chiefs are actually more penalized because they're watched so much, that kind of thing. You could, what do they say? Lies, damn statistics, the whole thing. You can make whatever argument you want. And so those don't really bother me. The idea that, like, maybe Mahomes or the Chiefs are getting a call here and there because they're playing at home, because of this, which is one of the reasons you want to play at home, by the way, the psychological effect that it is when 80,000 people are hoping you make a specific decision, how that can potentially bias the decision you make when you can feel the energy in the building hoping for one result. That's why you want to get the 1 seed and play at home. What I totally reject are the people who are acting like the Chiefs are fraudulent in general, or that this whole thing has been some sort of mirage, because that would require that 8 years ago, the other 31 owners, many of whom are from rather large market teams, got together and said, you know what would be in everybody's best interest is if we start rigging the game for a small market team that hasn't won a Super Bowl in almost 50 years. And you know how we know which team to pick is we'll choose the one that is dipping in to the superstar pipeline that is Texas Tech in their draft. Like, so I don't go for the whole, it's been, a conspiracy for a long time or a conspiracy at all. But I do think that, yeah, like when you're great, everyone, including sometimes referees, expect greatness, and that can affect their judgment.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of this. I think the thing that was hard for Bills fans was that we didn't get a call when our superstar did it, and at least from my read of the videotape, it was like frustrating to watch because you're like let's pretend it was 50-50,
and I think he didn't get it.
Well, let's pretend for a second it was 50-50 because I don't want to it's probably not the most interesting thing in the world to say whether he got the first down or not. But pretending it was 50-50, right? That's where we're like, well, our superstar should get that. And to use your sort of larger point, which is, well, it's a home game for the Chiefs, yada, yada. I think it's good pressure to put on the NFL to be as fair as possible. So whether it's a home game or not, or a superstar or not, we could both accept that it's likely that there are going to be certain biases, just like we would in a court of law if there's a rich person or a famous person getting better justice than somebody else. But we also should be hard on those venues to be as impartial as possible. And I think this gets to the larger question around why people are distrustful. And I think sports in general and the NFL in particular have earned our distrust. You look at Spygate, for example, where they destroyed the tapes from the Patriots. And when people say the Patriots got a raw deal around Deflategate, perhaps, I don't have a strong opinion about Deflategate. I think it's possible that there was mass hysteria, but not on Spygate, where they cheated and they destroyed the tapes. Goodell did not give a good explanation for why he destroyed those tapes. You look at other sports, Tim Donaghy and the NBA fixing games. That was a cover-up. You look at international sports, tons of examples. FIFA rigging. No offense to Addisu.
No.
FIFA rigging where the World Cup is every year. Olympics where there's a Soviet ref is like a joke, right? You talk about a Soviet judge is like a punchline in a joke, where in 1972 U.S. basketball lost a game that they shouldn't have lost and didn't even go to the medal game. More recently with French judges being pushed and bribed by the Soviets. You can go on and on and on. Icarus with steroids. There's just tons of cheating in sports. It's a real thing. People see it. Sometimes it's institutional action, like the Spygate situation. Sometimes it's smaller. Do I think there was cheating here? No. But I think people are just distrustful. They've seen it many years over. They don't trust these institutions, and those institutions, I think, in some cases, have earned that distrust.
So, I will give I agree with you, and I think that some of the responsibility lies in those institutions. But I think, and you shared with Addisu and I this poll, I think that the reason that this feels different this time than it has with past dynasties that people were tired of seeing winning, and the reason people are ascribing malfeasance and nefarious stuff to it, is because we have gotten to a place culturally, and it's now affecting sports, where we live in a choose your own reality, where if you don't like the result of an election, you can say that it was fraudulent. And okay, I lost a Senate race in 2016. There are still sometimes come up in my Google alerts, fan fiction written by people as if I won that race. And they and not because it's centered around me, but because there's whole other timelines that people write and people consume this stuff. That's let's not live in the reality that we didn't want. Let's live in this other reality. And I think it's bleeding into sports. The thing where you can now go out in politics and just say that somebody is, a traitor, say that somebody is this or that. And they're, if you're wrong, and I'm, I am on one side of this whole thing, but I'm not talking about one particular side. There are not repercussions for that kind of thing like there used to be. And that has allowed people who care about these things to just live in the reality they want to live in. And it used to be that sports was an escape from that. And now, if you, Ravi, it's painful for you to talk about the Bills losing, which you're doing an admirable job of doing it. I appreciate it. I've been to a Chiefs game with you against the Bills that ended in a dramatic way and the Bills lost. It is like your coping mechanism is you go weeks pretending it never happened. Like, we joke about it, and I'm not saying you're part of this. I'm just saying, like, I think as a country, we're just doing that when things don't go the way that we want. And I think it's extending it.
And you can find like-minded people quickly, particularly on social media via the internet too. So you don't have to feel alone in which is a huge part of this, right? And that is it's not the worst of the underbelly of social media, but it's one of the big ones, is that if you decide you want to live in a place where the Chiefs lost last week, like, you can do it. And and you can stay there through this Sunday Super Bowl, and you can stay there until next year and write fan fiction 4 years from now about how the Bills won the Super Bowl and beat the Eagles. Like, it is easy to not just believe it, but to surround yourself with a community of people who believe it. And, obviously you have a built-in community with the team, the fellow supporters of your team. So I agree 100% with what you're saying. I think that is the choose your own adventure nature of our world right now makes it so much easier to just choose your own adventure and decide where you want to be and what you want to believe, and not be challenged on that. Or I shouldn't say that, avoid challenging that. You guys are Bills and Chiefs fans. You're having a legitimate debate about this, but if Ravi decided he didn't want to participate in it, it is extremely easy to never talk to a Chiefs fan and only talk to Bills fans who believe what he wants for the rest of his life. And that is, that's not how it used to be. And I think 20 years ago, 40 years ago.
And I think there are different coping mechanisms, and all three of us are on the same side politically. And I think the more high consequence analogy here is the election, right? So, like, what do you do after an election? Now, Jason and I do a political podcast where some of our listeners believe the election was stolen. I don't happen to that. And I actually happen to be deeply disgusted by the conversation around the election before that and how that was talked about by the loser of that election. And I try to apply that to sports, which is low stakes here, right? Like, yes, I hated the fact that my team lost, and we have like a historically bad record of tough losses, and it's hard on everybody in my circles and in a whole city, but it's still just sports. And so for me, it's a way of like, and in many ways, being a Bills fan has made me a better Democrat, which is I just know how to like tuck it, like just be like, okay, this is like, what did you say?
Said lose.
Yeah. No,
I think that's what you mean, right?
For sure. Without a doubt. Like, I don't mean honest,
being a Chiefs
I know it
fan
sounds funny.
Makes me feel like a Republican.
Yeah. So it's using those muscles. Well, and in many cases it's the same thing, Jason, if we're being honest.
Do that.
But but what I mean by it is, like, in politics as in sports, fairness is an expectation, but not always a reality, right? And it's also gray areas of fairness, right? Like, what is fair, right? Do I think the entirety of the last election was fair in every way? No. Do I think it's helpful to emphasize anything I thought was unfair about the election? No. Because just like my Bills, there were plenty of things that my quote unquote team and the Democrats could have done better. And I think that's a more productive use of time. Actually, in the case of Democrats, I have some control over the outcome. In the case of the Bills, I have zero control over the outcome. Right. So it's an actually even easier thing to deal with, because I'm like, okay, now I can, why get all worked up over this thing I can't solve?
You could marry Jessica Pagula and maybe end up a governor of the team like Patrick Dumont.
In which case, but getting back to our GM conversation, if I were the owner, I wouldn't change anything in terms of the leadership. I tend to think of continuity. I feel very different about the Democrats. It's like, actually, the continuity there is just fine. Sometimes, I said this before the game, sometimes the ball is going to bounce one way or the other. We got lucky against the Ravens, right? They have almost everything. They probably don't have as much reffing stuff, although there probably were. We remember the things we want to remember. If I watched that game, there were some questionable calls against us for us. And it's like, I said to Jason after that game, that was a Chiefs win for us. Like, I felt like we got a little lucky, which I think is fine. I think to talk about a dynasty, right? Any team is going to have some luck with a lot of skill. And I think that's true of the Chiefs. This is true of any team that's won a lot of high profile games.
Turns out 50-50 calls, it's not inconceivable that a coin flip comes up heads 3 or 4 times in a row. Like, it happens all the time. Right. It's unlikely, but it happens. Right. And you just have to, in some ways, that's the thing that, if it feels like it's happening in high leverage moments for the Chiefs in 3 consecutive AFC championship games, like that's going to feel like something completely unbelievable. But like, if someone flipped the coin 3 times heads in a row, they wouldn't think nothing of it. Like, that's it's probability, it's life.
It's like as if you were to coin flipping, I think, does a disservice to the Chiefs, because it's as if you like ran a marathon and then flipped a coin, right? Like, they did a lot. I want to give them, like, we're all here. The Ravens, Bills, Chiefs, Eagles all do a lot to get there. And so I think that's what pisses off Chiefs fans, is when you're like, this is just luck. And it's like, no, it's like lots of really awesome things and then some luck. Even if you didn't have luck, you'd have plenty of Super Bowls. I think where the debate is, how many would you ever not? And honestly, like, I don't even like to play that game. Like, for me, it's like, I think it just looks petty. For me, it's like, all right, the Bills, and it also helps you think about your team, right? For me, it's like, let's just keep running that marathon and flipping the coin. That's how I think about the Bills. Maybe one day we'll get the coin to flip in our direction. Maybe we'll run so fast it doesn't matter what turns up on that coin flip. That's my hope.
The thing about a greatness bias is that in order to earn it, you have to first be great.
Yeah.
And so that is why so many Chiefs fans listen to this narrative and feel cheated, because they're like, but our team is great. And that's why.
And I don't want to rob you guys of that.
Yeah.
As much as I don't love how everything has gone down, like, I stipulate to that for sure.
Well, the whole thing, to finish the point, the whole thing just makes me sad. Not like, look, I'm a Chiefs fan, and I know that in 10 years, nobody's going to remember and start talking. Like, if we win this weekend, no one's going to be like, well, there was that first down. Like, no, like, they're going to remember who won 3 Super Bowls in a row, and they're and they're going to still see Patrick Mahomes on every single commercial. So I don't worry about that as a Chiefs fan. I worry about it as an American, in that if we are doing this choose your own adventure thing in the arena where we have traditionally not done it, it just worries me. It just worries me about our culture a lot. So
can I make one last case, Jason, before we go? It just occurred to me. There's one special carve out I want to make here, which is, it actually is logical to complain to the refs, whether you're a fan or a player. It actually helps you. And so that's where things get a little tricky, where it's like, let's say it's the lead up to the Chiefs game, and I'm like, hey, the Chiefs are cheaters and the refs are helping them. I don't believe that, but I probably will say that because it helps. Like, if there's some algorithm that Roger Goodell is paying attention to, it's all part of working the refs, and I will continue to do that. So I just want to carve out for that.
As we lead into our last segment, which is, aging amateur athletes, I still play wood bat, baseball, like over 30 wood bat baseball. And I play with pros and all this stuff. And I'm always trying to hang in there. And when there is a pitch called a strike on the outside corner, you don't complain. You turn to the umpire and you ask, is that as far as it goes outside? Because and they'll usually say yes. And now you have made an agreement, you and them, that if it goes further than that, you don't have, that's working the refs. That's always how it's done. So with that said, Ravi, you were going to tell us a little bit about amateur athletic.
Yeah, I did this. I did this thing called the High Rocks over the weekend in Vegas. I did it as part of a team, but over the next 3 months, I'm going to be doing it individual. And basically, it's this craze that started in Europe, very popular in England, and now is making its way over here, where it's a fitness competition. It's like there are 8 rounds. Each round is a 1 kilometer run with something else, like a heavy sled push, 1,000 meter row, et cetera, et cetera. And all kinds of divisions. You could do it as a team of 4, a team of 2, as an individual. There's pro, there's open. It's very successful. I mean, like, they pack out convention centers every weekend across the country. It's rapidly growing. And it was both a lot of fun, very challenging, but it made me think about, like, sports of fitness, like, to get to our conversation around flag football. Almost never spectator sports. Like, yeah, every 4 years we watch track and field at the Olympics, but nobody cares about fitness sports. CrossFit is a good example of this. And it just made me think about that. Like, the amount of time we're going to devote on this podcast to sports of fitness is probably next to zero.
Although you did send me I don't know if it counts as a sports of fitness thing. I guess the knockout thing you sent me is more, that's not a sport of fitness. That's just fighting each other. Right?
Oh yeah, this is like team MMA.
Yeah.
Yeah, people like combat sports, and I guess this helps
that's
explain what we don't like about sports of fitness is when it's just you against you. It's almost never a fun sport, right? Like, and let's be honest, track and field is not that interesting unless it's you against the other people, right? It's like if you're just watching people do a high jump on their own, whatever.
It's almost like the only time we really worry about sports that are you against you is if like you might die.
Yes. Yeah.
Then we do. Then we do. Do you still play sports?
No, God, no. I tore my ACL. I retired in 2016 when I tore my ACL playing pickup basketball, and I was like, I'm old now. So I'm on a fitness journey to be able to do that.
Right, we'll get you back to choosing a sport.
Get me back. Actually, tennis is the one. Tennis is the one. My wife and I. It's a sport you can play as you get older. I used to play. I really enjoy it. It's good. It's a good workout. So tennis is probably first on the list. Golf is second. Is golf a sport? I mean,
and Addisu has a son who is going to be an athlete. I think.
My son is a little dense, little brick of a man,
strong and
soon to be man. So we're gonna get him into some sports soon. But no, you're baseball. Ravi's over there, tough muttering or whatever the hell he's doing, and I'm just trying to get through the day here on my Peloton.
Good for you for not giving in and playing pickleball. Good job.
Jason, at some point we'll have to convince you of tennis. I know your wife is big into tennis, but also just from a spectator perspective, everything we say about F1 is true of tennis. The pettiest, craziest rivalries that are incredible to watch.
I've watched a little tennis.
Lots of cheating accusations. Lots.
I can get kind of into tennis, and I've played a little as Diana started playing. I started playing with her occasionally just so she could, practice. And it went from a year ago when she picked up tennis for the first time to where I could play and hang in with her. And now it's a waste of her time to practice against me because I've played 4 times ever. But all right. Well, anyway, this was the first episode of this show. I thought it was really fun. I hope people enjoyed listening to it. Thanks everybody for listening. Please leave us a 5-star review. It helps people find the show. Find us on social. I know I'm at Jason Kander. Ravi's at Ravi M. Gupta. Addisu, what is your handle on social media?
A Demissie is my Demissie.
Okay. Because of our other show, I've been giving Ravi's handle for years, so I have it memorized. But all right. We can test out different sign-offs. I've played around with some. I'm going to go with this one for don't let anybody tell you that sports don't matter. Thanks for listening.